Hello, I want to talk to you guys about a Jacobin article by Ben Burgis titled Why We Need a World Without Landlords. Basically, most people, I would guess 99% of people in America get their housing from a building that's privately owned, yet Ben wants to make that illegal because he has a better idea. Keep in mind, this guy is not an economist, he's a philosopher, and through some philosophical deduction, he came up with the idea that profit and landlords are bad, and government, everything that the government does is good, is going to be awesome, and he's going to tell us how. All right, let's get into the article. I kind of want to skip over, there's a lot of fluff here about protests, people, some congresswomen protesting, sleeping, and camping, whatever. Let's just get into the substance of the article. So first of all, actually, in the beginning, he does go into there's a lot of homeless people now, right? And as if this is the problem, is the fault of landlords. I mean, yes, there are people facing evictions right now. 15 million men, women, and children have faced eviction last week in Missouri, when Missouri Representative Cori Bush lodged their protest on the steps of the Capitol, right? So we have 15 million facing eviction, but then he brings in this homeless issue, which is, how is it a private landlord's fault that people are homeless? Every city has a homeless program that how they should shelter the homeless, and obviously if there's tons of people sleeping on the street, that the government cannot cope with even housing the homeless or taking them in off the streets. Yet Ben has this brilliant idea that everybody should rely on the government for housing, which clearly they can't even deal with. People are out in the street. It's like I don't want my housing situation to be, I don't rely on the government. No, thank you. I want to be a paying customer. That the landlord, they want my money, and I'm a source of revenue for them, and they want to make me happy. And if I'm the paying customer, they will make sure the place is not completely dilapidated, run down, roach infested, and if it is, my only recourse is to move and find another place where, if the government owns the building, I mean, this cold bureaucracy, they could don't give a fuck. I mean, if you just have this mental experiment, what is the worst customer service you ever got in your life? I would bet it's at the DMV. It's like at the passport office, anything to do interacting with the government, the state, where those people, you're not their customer. They get paid no matter what. They have their own boss. They have their own whatever. They suck up to their own, political higher ups. They don't give a fuck how they treat you, right? I mean, yes, there's some rarely there's some really bad customer service with restaurants and the private business, but not even close. I mean, not even close. All right, here we go. No more landlords. The left is far from controlling the levers of the U.S. state. In fact, we control so few that Democratic Socialist Congresswomen seeking to influence events had to resort to sleeping on the Capitol steps to get the attention of the media and the president. Well, I would argue with that. I think the left controls a ton of stuff in the United States. If there would actually be a conservative government, we would have never had an eviction moratorium in the first place. No landlord wants to evict tenants, but you need that out. You need to, that's the only stick that a lot of people can understand. That's the only option. Hey, the landlord will lose money evicting somebody because they have to go to court. They have to there's going to be vacancy. The evicted tenant's going to take it out on the unit and beat up the unit. It's a lose-lose. It's basically it's like a blow-off valve. It's the last resort. Nobody wants to evict a tenant, But if that option's taken off the table, then we're you know, this is uncharted territory. You know, we're getting into a hellhole here. All right. So here we go. All the people sleeping in parks in Los Angeles, other cities, should be given a normal permanent housing where they aren't subjected to degrading rules that require them to leave behind most of their possessions. So, okay, so he is here. He's talking about the homeless situation in Los Angeles. And everybody that's homeless should get a place to live. Even though, I mean, if you do a little bit of research, you just find out that, you know, there are a small percentage of people that are homeless that are probably living in their car that just need a place to stay because they just can't afford it. The bulk majority of them have mental issues, drug abuse, and just a combination of both. That it's not just a just giving them a place to stay. That's not enough. They need a ton of social services. And well, you know, I happen to know a little bit about LA, and I know that because of government mismanagement, cronyism, everything else under the sun, to build a homeless unit, it costs $800,000. So your anger, if anything, then should be directed directly at the government, not at private landlords. Okay. You know, you're not, I mean, I know you're, you know, you want to create a socialist utopia here, but we're unfortunately, we're still in the world with scarcity, right? And we can't, there's no way possible we can, you know, house everybody in an $800,000 unit. You know, what's the percentage of people that on Earth that live in an $800,000 unit? I'm thinking 0.0001%, you know? And that's the solution the LA government came up with. Clearly, they can't handle it. Politics won't, for whatever political reason. I mean, this is yours. You should be your job, you know, Ben. You should research why the government is so falling down on the job so bad, fucking this up, you know. Why? I mean, why are you going after landlords that are actually providing people safe and sanitary and decent housing and making a small profit while they're at it? Or hell, shit, some landlords aren't even making a profit at all. Some people are just breaking even. Some people are losing money, but they want to, you know, they think this is a good long-term investment. So, you know, you should look at the government, look at the state. The state's the problem. Let alone San Francisco had this tent program, so, you know, people wouldn't infect each other with COVID. Well, when they added up everything, you know, each tent cost $80K. Look it up, you know. Yeah, you want you want this government to provide everybody housing. Okay, sounds really plausible. In the long term, our goal should be a world where landlords don't exist. No. You mean where the landlord is the government? That's what you want. What do you mean landlords don't exist? Well, who's going to own the place? Who's going to build the place? The state is going to rent it to you. You're going to pay the state. You're going to, and then not only can you pay the state rent, or maybe, you know, subsidized rent, but they're going to get it on the back end from taxes that you pay, or other people have to pay. So the state will be your landlord. We're not in a scarcity world where you can magically 3D print as much units as possible. If that technology, you know, comes along, okay, we can talk about it. But at this point, people have to use real capital, real scarce resources to build these buildings. And in America right now, I mean, yeah, there's most medium-sized cities where it's not completely overrun by Democrat supermajorities. They have abundant housing of all sorts. They have luxury housing, they have middle-class housing, and everything between. They have budget housing, you know, they have go to a small city, medium-sized city, you can, for $400-$500, you can rent a very basic, a bedroom with a basic kitchen, nothing fancy, but it's not going to be roach infested. It's not going to be a government project hellhole. with people selling drugs in the hallway or whatever. Hey, the landlord has an incentive. I mean, the government doesn't give a fuck, right? The government bureaucracy is so cold. At least the landlord, I mean, if this is their bread and butter, they want to make sure that yes, there are some slumlords, but for the most part, the landlords, they want to make sure, that their buildings are appealing, right? Because they can refinance it, they can pull money out of the place, and the bank, when they do that, the bank inspects the place, make sure everything, this place, they have some good collateral, and good collateral meaning, hey, this place is clean, it's occupied, there's tenants in there, there's not crazy crime, graffiti, So most of the housing stock in America is pretty decent. I mean, when you compare it to like public housing. So, I mean, unless you have some brilliant idea, you have some brilliant idea that these government idiots haven't been able to figure out. Okay, well, just put in the article. Right now, your article is complete just wish list of stuff. Like I want to abolish poverty. We're gonna make hunger illegal. Make bad feelings illegal. Everybody has the right to housing, healthcare, whatever. But it's these type of words are cheap, right? But they're you didn't come up with a system to provide this for everybody. Landlords typically don't build the housing they buy and rent out. Some small-scale landlords do upkeep themselves instead of hiring maintenance workers, but that doesn't make their salary for performing this work any more than the owner of a small restaurant who sweeps the place up himself as a janitor. I mean, oh god, instead of writing these articles, maybe he should take an economics class. I mean, I think that would really help him out here. The issue is, these buildings take millions and millions of dollars to build, okay? And because somebody has to invest that money, they would want a return on their investment. And obviously the rent is not so expensive to recoup the investment over 1 month. You need years, 10, 20, 30, 40 years to recoup the building. But people are willing to do that because they can collect rent, create a profit, right? So if you create a profit, then that means they can do it again. If they create a profit and get their money back, well, they have that money, they can buy more buildings, build more buildings for people, right? If you take away, I mean, you don't want, this is a good thing, you want people to make a profit, because if something's profitable, that means you're doing the right thing. For the most part, I mean, not always, but that means that just if you get the money back, that enables you to keep going. Like, how long is a restaurant going to be around if it doesn't make a profit? Everybody needs to make a profit. I mean, that's just so natural to just humanity in general. I mean, I understand why, because you have some hang up on some like psychological thing. Some landlord has the power over a tenant, and you want a single person having a power over a tenant, so you're going to create this crazy ass system where the government owns everything, and then there's no one person that has power, but it's the state, which is much worse, and everybody's like in misery. I mean, but yet, hey, there is no landlord that's making a small profit off a tenant, so there you go. Oh, and by the way, I remember Ben Burgis here. Yeah, he does debates, and he was debating a free market guy called Yaron Brook, and Yaron Brook just called him out like, "Hey, you want to take my stuff?" And Ben is like, "Whoa, no. You can have personal possessions. We don't want to take your stuff. You can have your own. Even under Stalin, you can have your own toothbrush. You could have like those books in the background. You can keep those books, whatever, But we just take a little bit of money out of your bank account. Even though our middle class American probably pays 50% of their taxes, have spent half of their day working for the government." When you add up payroll taxes, add up sales taxes, you pay, average person spends half of their salary, half of their income on taxes. He wants more. But not only that, he says he don't want to take anything, but then he says abolish landlords. Meaning if you own a house and you divide it up to two so you can rent it out, make your ends meet a little easier. You own a duplex or triplex, you live in one of the units yourself and rent out the other ones. No, you're abolished. The state's going to nationalize that. He's going to, later on the article, it says, basically you can just crash the economy and make you sell this thing at a loss. Just buy up your property like that, So basically, if you have a little bit of a nest egg, you saved up, instead of consuming everything in your life, you actually had some discipline and saved some money because you had some future foresight that, you maybe it's going to make your life easier. No, fuck you. That's nationalized. That's going to be taken from you. I mean, it's pretty evil stuff here. The idea of socialist vision of housing might conjure up bleak images of concrete apartments in 1970s Moscow where multiple families are forced to share the same kitchen. Yes, it does. But we don't need to limit our imagination to that model in a dystopian housing system in the United States. So in Vienna right now, 60% of the population lives in social housing that depend on the building owned by either the city or non-profit housing associations. Well, that's a fucking landlord. Somebody owns your building anyway. You don't own it. You have to pay rent to somebody. How is this abolishing anything? One of the crowning achievements of 1920s and 1930s Red Vienna when social democrats ran the city. Yeah, you have an example. I mean, if I'm being honest, this building doesn't look that bad. It looks pretty good, but when you take everything, look at the big picture, take everything into account, all the social housing, all the projects that built in the United States or around the world. Yeah, maybe you can find like 5 or 6 buildings that they didn't completely manage to fuck up, but I don't like those odds. All right, social housing in Vienna consists of attractive single-family apartments. There are strict controls on what can be charged for rent, and the rest of the tab is picked up through progressive taxation. Unlike public housing in the United States, it's not economically segregated. Middle-class tenants are not only permitted to live in the social housing, but sometimes eager enough to do so, they want to wait a year or two until a spot opens up. So here you go. You're bragging about this awesome Vienna system where even middle-class people want to live. Oh, but here it is. There is a year or two waiting list to get in there. I mean, that's already, isn't that a red flag right there? Yeah, you have the right. You have the right to free healthcare. You have the right to free apartment, free this, free that, whatever. Yeah, but you can cancel landlords. You can't cancel economics. Can't cancel scarcity. So there's going to be a little bit of a wait, maybe a year or two. As the population grows, it goes to 5, 10 years. In the USSR, to buy, you can get a free car. It might take you 20 years. This is an extremely attractive model, but doesn't quite get us to society without landlords. Why? Why do you need a society without landlords? You just don't like the name? A landlord? It conjures up some medieval thing. Just change the name. It's going to be much easier and cheaper. Just call them something else. If only options were buying your own home or living in a Red Vienna style housing, what about those waiting lists? Will we be back to Soviet style housing arrangements after all? Most likely, yes. It's easy to say that we would spend so much building social housing after nationalizing landlord-owned buildings. Great. That there would never be a lag between housing as people move from place to place, leave old relationships. Okay, so basically it goes on like, there might be room for public house or for private housing because the government can't predict what city people want to move in for jobs and stuff like that. So but listen, man, if you're gonna nationalize the housing people build, who's gonna spend millions and billions of dollars building these big apartment buildings? If socialist government on a whim, in your scenario, you already nationalized all the housing stock. Who's going to be the idiot to invest a shit ton of their own hard-earned savings to build these things? But here's the solution. Even though there's no reason this would have to be a landlord-owned housing rather than housing owned by an association of tenants using seed money from a publicly owned banks. Oh, I don't know, man. This sounds sketchy. So we want to politicize banking. You know, how good of a party member you are, how good of a good socialist you've been. You know, how many socialist books have you written? You know, then they might look favorably upon you. You know, whose ass you kiss, whose boot you lick. Then they're going to give you this loan from a publicly owned bank, instead of just being like a bank that just doesn't care. You know, anybody can get a loan as long as you can pay. They feel that you can pay them back. That seems like a lot more equitable and fair, and you know, a much better situation. And then here's owned by association of tenants. That's not illegal now. You could do that now, Ben. Go ahead. Pool your money together. Tenants can pool their money together and build a building, and you know, live in separate units. I mean, that's not illegal. People don't do that. Like, yeah, I'm an aspiring Hollywood actor. You know, I'm going to move to Hollywood. Oh, but before, let me get some people together, and we're going to, you know, build me a fresh unit. You know, it's just this pie in the sky shit here. Why we need a positive vision. Everything I've described already exists in the real world. Vienna exists. Tenant-owned housing exists. Public development banks exist. A fully landlord-less housing system, these elements would simply be combined in the way they haven't been before. The point for this vision isn't to suggest that isn't a necessary endpoint. Perhaps even better housing system will be possible further down the line. Perhaps one day we can decommodify housing entirely without replicating the problems of previous attempts. I don't know. My point is simply that, one or the other, we can realistically move past the current system. As battles over eviction and homeless encampments show, we're nowhere close to the horizon of socialist housing, but we need to have such an animating vision as we might navigate the often hellish choices of contemporary capitalism. While alternatives we advocate are only slightly better than the worst case scenario, there are sometimes very real trade-offs both directions. It's much harder to get people excited about fighting for comparatively progressive outcomes. We need a vision of quantitatively better world, one where housing rights reign and landlords are a thing of the past. Oh, yeah, exactly. All your rights can reign. I can grant your right. You deserve it, man. Everybody deserves free house. Okay, it doesn't mean anything, man. You know, we're not. There's scarcity in this world, right? And the best way to deal with scarcity is through the market. People want to live in places. Look, I talked to a coffee shop owner in this neighborhood where I'm currently living. There's a multimillionaire, older guy, gentleman. He's in the 70s, and he's rehabbing buildings here, remodeling apartments. And the coffee shop owner said, "Hey, this guy's not. By the time these places are rehabbed, and he's not going to get his money back. He's putting in millions of dollars into fixing up these apartments. He's not going to live to. I mean, he's only got maybe 10 years left to live in his life. 20 if he's lucky. He's never going to see his money back, but." He wants to live. He enjoys doing this. He's investing into this neighborhood. He wants to see this neighborhood get better. Maybe he's going to live this legacy for his children, so his children can, get some of the money back and collect the rent. So the private system we have here is working. I mean, I would say pretty well, but where it's not working well, it's where the Democrat supermajority city in like LA and New York, where landlords or private capital can't build buildings. But why is that? It's because of zoning. They can only build luxury housing because it costs so much to build in those places because of all this, laws and regular labor laws. It's all these You need like minimum underground parking spaces, and a certain amount of green space. Everything needs to be X amount of feet, and then anybody from the neighborhood could just come to a meeting and shut down that project. That or even like sue the building and sue the project and make it. They want to build 5 stories. They'll sue it and make them take a story a floor off. So it's not a lack of capital. I mean, people, investors. I'll put it this way: companies make a shit ton of more money selling Honda Civics and Toyotas than they sell Ferraris. Investors, by the most part, don't want to build luxury housing. There's much less demand for luxury housing. These neighborhoods, they could snap their fingers changing zoning laws, and you could have 4 or 5 unit apartment buildings pop up everywhere throughout the city at no extra cost to the government. Private businesses can, overbuild and lose money, and a lot of them do. They, sometimes they start building too many buildings, or a housing developer builds too many subdivisions, and they lose millions and billions of dollars. That's fine. I mean, that's what happens. If you open up the market to competition, competition's pretty brutal, and whoever provides the best housing arrangement for people wins. Makes some profit. Even that profit gets competed away to nothing. Why would you? Something that's working pretty well, we just know how to, it's very clear that in some places just the zoning that needs to be fixed. Why would you want to switch the whole country to this potential nightmare? I mean, you found like 1 or 2 buildings in Vienna. That's not a fucking hellhole, okay? But what are the chances you're going to switch everybody with your vision? You're going to switch over everybody to the fucking projects? I mean, nightmare. Why? What's the reason for that? Because you don't like the word landlord? All right.